Behind me, running in through the centre of Darlington, is the River Skern. Now, Skern comes from an old Anglo-Saxon word meaning bright water. Now, up until the 18th century, it was actually much wider and much shallower than it is today. It's basically, we built embankments on it. But there are records of people fishing here and fishing here and building lives around here over 6,000 years ago. After Norman conquest in 1066, obviously the north of England did get a bit of a shake-up, known as the Harrying of the North. And one of the things that William the Conqueror did was he gave a lot of power to the Bishop of Durham. In fact, the County of Durham, which is where we are now, is also known as the land of the Prince Bishops. Basically because the Bishops of Durham used to be able to mint their own currency and were able to, basically, they were kings of Durham. And here in Darlington, where the Department for Education Darlington branch now stands, they've moved a lot of the government up here, right, was the Bishop of Durham's manor house here in Darlington. This whole area is known as Feetham's, and this was the site of one of the manor houses of the Bishop of Durham. And basically the reason, and this one was actually one of the grandest, purely because back then, as now, Darlington was a market town, and Darlington was a pretty important one. And it was very important for the Bishops of Durham to have a base of control all over the place. There are loads of sites of old manor houses. Obviously, they built that where it once stood. It was actually torn down in the 1700s, the old manor house. And it was built, actually, it used to stand just between the Department for Education, which is the modern building, and the town hall, which is that brutalist monstrosity over there. And yeah, this was kind of the place. This was seen as a very important place. And the reason why the Bishop of Durham also liked it here was because, as you can see the spire somewhere behind me. You can't actually, you can see the spire there of St. Cuthbert's Church, which was a very important and large church in Darlington. And we'll talk about more about that later on. Now, one thing that I think important to know before we know anything about the history of Darlington is, of course, to know where it comes from and what it is. So Darlington basically is a government bit. Darlington is a market town in the northeast of England. It is within the ceremonial county of Durham. However, it is a unitary authority, which basically means that for local issues, those things are decided here in Darlington. Now, Darlington as a place actually began over 1,000 years ago. It wasn't actually called Darlington, it was originally called Darlington. Right? Put the spelling there. And basically what that means is ton is obviously town. So basically anything ending in ton was a Saxon town. And basically it was the town of Danoff's people, right? So obviously, the people around here were ruled by somebody called Danoff, right? And basically it started as a market town. It started on the banks of the Skern, in this area that we are in now. And basically what Darlington, actually there's a board just over here. I'm just going to consult that. So the manor house that I mentioned earlier was actually built by the 12th century, and back then basically everything was made out of, every house was simple stone. So a massive great manor house made out of stone. Everything else was made out of wood, sorry. So as I was saying, so the manor house was completed by the end of by the 12th century. And back then, Darlington, everyone lived in simple wooden houses, basically peasants, right? So having a whacking great manor house around here must have seemed like a palace to the people here. And the palace, manor house being made out of stone, did help it survive the Great Fire of Darlington of 1535, when the place burnt down. However, I'll talk more about that in my Tudors bit, in my Tudors video, because quite a lot of things happened during the Tudoring. Now, by 1808, the bishops no longer needed a manor house here, and so the manor house was actually used as Darlington's poorhouse. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, so basically back then, if you were poor, you could turn to the state to get some help, like now. However, unlike today, where they just give you money, back then the help really consisted of just going to a poorhouse and asking for help. And yeah, it was a harsh, horrible place that you really didn't want to be. Now, of course, this was before the workhouses. We did have one in Darlington, but frankly, do that in the Yorkshire series. But Darlington's poorhouse was one of the most dilapidated, was one of the worst poorhouses in the area, and people got sick of it and tore the place down, really. They tore it down, and it was no more. So I hope you enjoyed that video looking at the history of Darlington's manor house, which again was just there. Now, there is nothing that you can't actually see any of it from surface level. It was torn down, and the Tories built the Department for Education on top of it, so there isn't much to see. However, if you do want to visit Darlington, then of course there are links down below. But basically, you can get the train from London. There are trains every half hour from London going up to Scotland. Just hop off at Darlington and just walk down the hill until you get to here, Riverside Park, which is the least original name ever. And you can find, and you just look for the big red building. It's just there. There's a sign telling you all about the history over there. And it is a pretty nice place to visit. And in case you're wondering about accommodation, apologies, we have got one of those. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.